Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Anthony Burns, who is physiotherapist and co-founder at ecovery, which we'll talk about later on. So Anthony, thank you for joining.
No problem. Nice to be here.
Glad to hear it. Although you did show me that mug before, so do you want to show us what mug you've got? Because I'm not overly impressed. Yeah. So I know you picked that just because I'm an Everton fan, but I'm not quite as hostile towards towards Liverpool anymore. But you're a Liverpool fan then?
Yeah. My dad's a Scouser, a proud Scouser. Yeah, was born and brought up in Blackburn actually. But yeah, I've always been brought up a Red. So yeah, I've followed our journeys over the last sort of 43 years. So yeah, it's been quite the ride.
Yeah, well, I think you and I are a similar age, just from looking at from what you're saying there, 43. So I was 44 last week, but I remember I used to. Well, it was in the period when being an Everton fan, we had Joe Royle. I had a season ticket around that time, and we didn't lose a game to Liverpool, which was great. But Liverpool's just been just so much better than Everton for my apart from at the very early stage, just like Gerrard and Fowler, even Owen, just yes, daggers to your heart.
Yeah, I mean, my first real kind of era was Kenny's era. Yeah, the Kenny Dalglish team. Steve McMahon and that kind of era, and Alan Hansen, and then moving on to the later '80s. Obviously, the '88 team, which was just amazing. So, but then then kind of observed the decline really into the '90s. And that was, but like that's the journey of a football fan, really, isn't it? You've just got to ride with it. But yeah,
Yeah. See, you really young if you were doing the ones in the sort of mid early 80s. I went to the Everton Liverpool 4-4. Remember, it was Kenny's last game, and it was it was the FA Cup replay, which is it's definitely the best game I've ever been to. It was amazing. We have all of Liverpool's goals are brilliant. I think it's like Barnes, Beardsley, Rush, and Everton's were all absolute scrappy affairs. Like Cotty and Sharp got two each. But yeah, I've got such good memories of, even though Everton were poor, it was just great times going to Goodison and Anfield a couple of times.
so you went to that 4-4 game. You
I was
actually
at the
there.
4-4, yeah. So it was my brother and I and a few mates was right on the Gladys Street, right at the front. We used to turn up really early to go to those, but yeah, that was definitely one of the best.
You had the feeling of an end of an era that game for a Red, a Red persuasion. I just had the feeling when there's a fairly iconic moment when I think the fourth goal goes in for Everton and kind of just like slumps down in the dugout, and you're like, yeah, that's kind of possibly Penny done for this job, sort of thing.
Yeah. And he did go,
But
didn't he? He did resign after that 4-4 because it'd come off he'd been going to all of the funerals at Hillsborough, hadn't he? So I guess it was just like he'd been carrying a massive weight, and then yeah, it literally was an end of an era, wasn't it? Once he'd gone.
yeah, it was. Yeah, and then a barren period. So yeah, where it didn't come again until, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago, when we won the league.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's again, I'm not quite as bitter. When you're at school and you've got like that Everton, everyone was Everton or Liverpool really at school, and it's horrible, isn't it, going in? Fortunately, Everton did okay then, so it wasn't too bad, and I'm not quite as hostile. Liverpool have been brilliant for the last few seasons, and we do supply them with more stuff than Everton actually. But anyway, that's a different thing. So no, it's really interesting. We could do a whole podcast on this. I love talking about the time, especially the 90s and noughties. I just absolutely loved that era.
Like, yeah, we're very lucky in this country to have the Premier League and be so invested in it, and yeah, it's just an unbelievable competition, isn't it? It's just. But I mean, I've been football mad since I was a kid. So I don't know about you, Andy, but absolute football mad.
Mm.
So yeah, you have to tear me off a game sometimes, and playing and watching. I've always loved watching just as much as playing. But yeah, absolutely football mad.
So
And sport.
is that one of the things which one made you want to get into physio, or how did that come about?
No. I've always just been like, as a kid, I just like. I mean, I had an amazing childhood. Like, we lived in this small village outside of Blackburn called Belthorne, and it was on a top of a hill, and it was this like little community, and it was just an amazing place to grow up as a kid. Got like five. We're a family of five in terms of like, I've got four older sisters, and it was just an amazing place to grow up. So it was a proper child of the 80s sort of thing. You'd because it was quite a small place, but it was on the edge of the moors in Blackburn. You'd just go out for the day with your mates. 4 or 5 of you, and you go out to the moors and explore. There's like old mines and like as in old coal mines and all this kind of stuff. And like you just go out trekking and stuff, and then you'd come back. You'd play football for 4 hours with your mates, and then you'd go home and or like you'd walk down the street, and I might pop in for tea with like Ruth and Cliff, who were our neighbours next door. Do you know what I mean? And you'd get home and your mum would be like, your mum would be like, do you want tea? I'd be like, I've just had it at Ruth and Cliff's actually. And, Ruth was there like, oh, come on, tell me all about your day and stuff. Like, oh, I'll be doing this. Yeah, that was it. And then, but football was an integral part of all of that, because we lived next to, like, school was about a minute away. And so, yeah, it was just, that was kind of what we did then, really. And so yeah, it was just a great childhood, really.
Yeah, no, sound very similar. I can definitely empathise with all of that stuff. It was really good being able to go and kick a ball about with your mates. So, and then when you were at school then, so what was did you have any sort of plan in terms of what you wanted to do when you were doing GCSEs or onto A levels?
No. I wasn't very academic as a kid, really, which isn't probably something good to admit, really. But yeah, I wasn't very academic. I was like I said, I was just obsessed with like football, outdoor play, being with my mates, sort of thing. And then I got onto so I went to school. I did all right, but I always got the feeling and I always got the feedback that I could do better. So I went to school, college, and stuff. And then I went to do a degree in sports technology, actually, which was okay, and there's no problem, but it wasn't what I wanted to do because I don't know what a sports technologist is. Do you know what I mean? But it was a very new course. It was like, yeah, okay, let's do that, and then I finished that, and then moved to Leeds, and then. A lot of my friends were in uni in Leeds, and it's not that far from where I was from. So I moved there, stayed there for 2 years, and just had the time of my life. I'd really, really just had the time of my life, and I kind of worked out, what I wanted to do in that period, where it was like, what am I going to do with the rest of my life, sort of thing. And then it was a case of, well, I want a job that where I can help people. I want a job where I can use my brain. I've always been fascinated by science and the human body and stuff and biology. That was always the subject at school that got me going, sort of thing. And I wanted a job where I wasn't an office job, like I could use my hands and, a very practical job. And that kind of really, I just thought, well, that's physiotherapy, really. And because I've got the degree in sports technology, I could get onto the course. So I got offered an MSc in Aberdeen. Pardon me. But Aberdeen, have you ever been to Aberdeen?
It's a long way north, isn't it?
I had no idea. Like, I was going as a very naive. I went, on the train. I was like, okay, right, it's going to stop soon, and it never did. And I just thought, this is a long way from home. And also I got a place in Manchester, and I got offered a BSc in Manchester, and a lot of people were saying, well, you should take the MSc because it's 2 years and whatever, and it's an MSc, and I just thought, well, it's possibly 3 years for a reason, and it's a lot closer, and Manchester, what a great place to have a uni experience, sort of thing. So yeah, that was kind of how I kind of found myself, going down the physiotherapy route, really.
Was that Abibor Johannes? Was he involved with that? Remember that name?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So the reason I ask that is it's got, I mean, it's a memorable name, isn't it? But I remember because I was working for IPRS, it was my old employer, and I went in talking about trying to sell him some Biodex kit or some other technology. And then he kind of spun it on me and was like trying to get me to sign up to do a master's or a BSc or something. And like went and told my boss, who was a physio, and he's like, "You're going to be the salesman here doing this." And you've come out thinking, actually, no, I need to sign up for this 2 year part-time course. So yeah, no, that was because he was. What was he part of your course then?
Yeah, yeah, that sounds very much like I was about that. Yeah, he was a tutor. What did he teach? Can't remember. He was more research focused, was out about. But yeah, he definitely had a sales streak in him. He really did. And I think he did my interview actually. Carol Thatcher, I think, and Ababel, and then yeah, I think it was Carol and Ababel actually did my interview. Because not every physiotherapy course did an interview. So Leeds didn't interview. And you know, because I was having such a good time in Leeds and I'd lived in Leeds, Leeds was the sort of sensible place for me to apply for. Yeah, he was a proper legend at Manchester as well.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I really do remember that. That's probably about 13 or 14 years ago now. But just going back to the sports tech one, because because I was at Alsager at the same time. You were there 97 to 2000, weren't you? And so we probably used to go to like Valentino's on a Monday night occasionally, I guess, at that's which memorable for different reasons. But what was part of the sports tech? What actually did you do on that course?
So it was a very new course, and it was just to learn about the technology that underpinned sport, and you know, things like, you know, materials and you know, the materials that make up certain products. And I think I ended up doing my dissertation on we had some computer software which basically I did it on stadium safety, and using some computer software, like different methods to improve crowd safety and things like that. So it was stuff like that, really, stuff around sport. But it was a very new course, and they were just finding a way with it. Really, I think we were the first ones actually. Um, and so I'm not sure if it's still running or whatever, but that was kind of that was really what it was all about. You know, like, yeah, about the materials and the products around sport and activity, really.
Was it helpful when you did your physio course, having done that?
Yeah, it was. It was just because I knew the process. Do you know? Yeah, I just knew the process. I knew the process of independent learning, but to be fair, it was physiotherapy was a different beast because I was where nothing had really captured my attention before as a child growing up at school, because I was always obsessed with other things. Um, Physiotherapy just completely captured me. It just completely enraptured me because I was like, you know, I remember sitting there sometimes in my classes, and you know, it'd be like, right, okay, for the next 3 weeks, we're going to learn about the knee or something. And I remember thinking in class sometimes, I'm getting paid to, like, because we were at that time you were given an NHS bursary, and you know, to obviously aid your studies and stuff. And it was like, oh, I'm getting paid to learn about the knee, which is amazing because I'm so fascinated by it. And so for someone who'd had kind of a very mediocre academic career to that point, to be getting feedback like, "Oh, you're doing really well," and you know, getting great marks and stuff, it became like a really positive cycle, where it was just like, yeah, it just further entrenched my belief that I'd chosen the right thing to do. Do you know, the right sort of career. So yeah.
And what were the other people like? Bearing in mind you were a mature student, what was the general breakdown of the other students?
Yeah, there was a lovely kind of mix, really, of mature students. That was like, what was I about 20, 24, I think then. 23, I might be 23 or 24, something like that. Yeah, we were kind of seen as the kind of more mature kind of father figures sort of thing, and mother figures of the group, you know, like our sort of age group. And there were loads of youngsters there, like sort of 19-year-old fresh out of college, just really, because Manchester's an amazing place, isn't it? It's just, you know, to go to uni there as an 18-year-old when you've just arrived must be like from a quite small village somewhere, must be like, oh my word, sort of thing. And so you'd come in and, you know, you'd try and help them out with, like, you know, what are we doing today? Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing. So, but there was a really nice mix, actually. And also it was one of the biggest cohorts. I think it might be the biggest cohort in the country at the time. And we had our own, like, independent campus. So it was quite intense, you know, because there wasn't any other sort of dissipation with any other groups and whatever and other courses. So yeah, there was a really nice mix, actually, and I still keep in touch with a lot of them now.
Yeah, what sort of things have they gone on to do then?
All sorts. Got loads of people who've been. I was at my friend Nick's the other week. He's become well, a lot like you know, my best mate Gav, paediatric physiotherapist. Most of them went on to become physios, obviously, because very vocational course, isn't it? And then sort of specialised in their own different areas. And then we had quite a few international students, actually. A lot went back, obviously, to their home. And then, yeah, a lot. And the Joey used to live with, she set up her own business, and actually that just romped on. So she set up a sideline she set up a netball league just as a sideline to a physiotherapy studies, but it got so big that I think she just did that ongoing sort of thing. So yeah, quite a lot of area, but obviously a lot that did just go on to become physiotherapists, because that's obviously what we wanted to do, really.
And then, so when you were coming to the end of that, then did you have an idea of the environments that you wanted to go into?
No, I thought I wanted to do stroke rehab, actually, because my really close family friend Christine, she was a stroke physio, and I went up to see her in. They live in Newcastle at this time, and so I went up to see her before I started physiotherapy, and I thought I wanted to do that, but it required, like, have you ever had any dealings with neuro rehab?
Not extensively, no.
It requires incredible patience, and you know, I don't think I'm an impatient person, but it requires incredible patience and incredible analytical skills, and yeah, I just thought maybe I want something a bit more faster paced, if you like, and then MSK just kind of gradually sort of became a focus for me, and you know, I just kind of was fascinated by it, really, and you know, I've never sort of lost that, really.
So what was your first environment that you went into post study?
Where did we go? There was a jobs crisis at the time, because it was Agenda for Change had just taken hold, and so yeah, there was a bit of a jobs crisis. So there was talk in the cohort that, like, listen, we're not going to get jobs, because I think what had happened is Agenda for Change had happened, and then that meant that there was basically they stopped hiring people for 1 year, and that year was just before us. So essentially 2 years worth of physios were trying to apply for 1 year's worth of jobs when we qualified. So we got, me and my best mate Gav, we got jobs at Airedale for 6 months, which is, do you know Keighley at all?
I know the hospital.
Yeah, it's quite a small district general, but an amazing place to start your career, sort of thing. Kelvin was my boss, and Mark was my senior there, and he was amazing. Visually impaired physio, actually, just absolutely amazing physio. And so was Kelvin, and really great team there. So that was a lovely place to start. But then it was only temporary seats. So then when we got offered permanent jobs, Gav got one in Norwich, I got one in North Tees, up in Yarm near Hartlepool. And so I went up there for 2 years, and yeah, although actually around that time, me and Gav got offered jobs in Florida, actually, when we qualified. We'd got the minute we qualified, because they were desperate for physios in America at the time. And we'd got the jobs. The company wanted to fly us over and all that sort of stuff, pay for our visas and things. I think it was like $60,000 a year or something. And we were like, right, okay. And so we were all set. But I met my wife, my now wife, Helen, at that time. And so I just didn't want to leave, really, obviously. And it just, and also another thing, me and Gav were a bit worried that if we went and then we came, like, we just might not be able to come back and work in the NHS because we wouldn't have had any NHS experience. So that was always a bit of a little sort of thing in the background, worrying about that scenario with taking the Florida sort of thing. So yeah, we stayed, and yeah, that was our sort of first taste in, well, my first taste in the NHS.
And what made the bosses that you had at Airedale, what made them, like, you spoke really highly of them? What was it in particular about those guys that made them such good managers?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think they were really caring. They were really thoughtful. They were really happy to give of their time. They were passionate about the career. They were passionate about helping people. Often they worked in difficult circumstances because, you know, we all know sort of NHS funding and things. So they worked incredibly hard in incredibly difficult circumstances sometimes. And, you know, just, yeah, you know, you just had the feeling that you were working for people who actually just genuinely cared about delivering a great service, and you want to work with people. Well, I want to work with people like that. So yeah, those were kind of the traits, really, but also good clinicians, you know, really good clinicians. So, like, obviously you're like a sponge when you've just qualified, because physiotherapy is a bit like driving. You know, you pass your test, but but you know, you're not safe on the road, sort of thing. And my experience of physiotherapy was the same. You know, it's just like, yeah, you pass your test, you're a physiotherapist, but really you've got you've got a lifelong learning contract that you kind of sign, really, when you become a physiotherapist, but or any sort of like healthcare job, I would imagine. Yeah, so that's kind of just what made them really good people, really.
Yeah, no, it's always good to hear when someone speaks so positively about people. Certainly early on in your career, it makes a massive difference of either reinforcing that you're in the right profession or potentially turning against you, which a few people I've spoken with have had experiences in both of those sides. So where did you go on to after you'd done was it North Tees you went, and then after you decided to not go to America?
Yeah. So I went to North Tees for 2 years. So I did my junior rotations there. Worked with, again, some amazing people like Steve Pett and all sorts of other great people there. Did my rotations. So that was like 4 monthly rotations. But I was living apart from Helen at the time. And so, yeah, once I'd done my rotations after a couple of years, it was like, right, this has achieved for me what, you know, I wanted to sort of achieve up there, and I felt I'd done everything. And the next position after that was a senior role, or becoming a senior and working towards that. So then I took a job down where I now live, near where I now live in Leeds. And I've worked in Leeds ever since, basically. But so I worked for a further 5 years at Mid Yorks. I think it was 4 or 5 years. And then I've been at Nuffield in Leeds for the last 8 or 9, I think. So yeah, but Mid Yorks was awesome as well, because at Dewsbury. That was a small sort of district general. Again, it was like, again, you just, but there was some amazing clinicians there, like Adele Fanning, Joe Duncan, Nush Dudson, you know, like some brilliant forward-thinking, like really fantastic clinicians who you can learn off. Although in-service training was a bit worrying around that time, because if ever I had to do it, I was always worried, because you know when you're like delivering a presentation to something like some really people, like some great physios you admire a lot, let's say, you know, you're just like, okay, I hope this goes well, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so you were doing MSK work. Was there any particular area? Was it just a general outpatients that you were working on?
I was working very much with I did do that. I did do some work in the departments there. So we had MSK departments in the fields and at Dewsbury. I worked a lot in rheumatology as well with Mark, who again was great. Learned a lot there, but then really my prime focus was in the gym. So I worked a lot in the gym, which was really good, because you know, in the NHS it's push for time, but in the gym you got some quality time with patients. Saw some really complex trauma patients, like you know, people like peel-on fractures and all sorts of like really rare stuff that you wouldn't normally see. Yeah, so I spent a lot of time in there in the end, which was why I stayed for so long, really, because you know, maybe I wasn't progressing in terms of kind of like band 6, band 7 sort of thing, but I was progressing clinically a lot at that time. So I stayed probably maybe a year or two, you know, too long, if you like. But really, I was enjoying learning so much that I just stayed really for in the gym. That was. Um,
Yeah,
so
and how different was it when you were doing the work in Nuffield then compared to was that the first work you'd done outside of the NHS?
yeah, so yeah, because that point, I think I've worked, yeah, I think I worked for the NHS about 7 or 8 years at that point. So I felt I'd paid off the bursary, do you know, like, because you've got that feeling where you feel like, right, okay, I've got to work for the NHS, not got to, but you know, I want to ensure that I feel like I can say, yeah, I earned, you know, I earned that money back for the NHS sort of thing. And then, yeah, working for Nuffield was very different. But you know, just you get more time with patients and things like that, really. And so yeah, it is different. There's no doubt about it. But in many ways, it's the same, in a sense that you know, it's all about that connection. It's all about trying to improve someone's you know, state of health, and trying to move them from one stage to another. And so the job's the same, but yeah, the conditions are different. There's no doubt about that.
Mm. Yeah, and then in terms of like the Nuffield's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's a charitable organisation, but it's still run as a commercial company. And so like that is Leeds is one of the bigger ones for Nuffield, isn't it? Is that right?
Yeah. It's probably a flagship one. Yeah, we've got a critical care unit and all sorts of stuff. They do heart surgery as well there and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a massive hospital, and it's next to the LGI. So and so you know, for a private hospital you get a lot of experience. Plus, you know, I was lucky enough to get about 3 or 4 promotions, or like different roles within Nuffield. So you know, I always felt like I was progressing or doing more or getting more experience, you know. So yeah, it is. It's a massive organisation. But yeah, it was. Yeah, it's really good. Really nice place to work.
And then in terms of like the promotions, and so were they all within clinical roles, or were they like moving into management, or how did they work?
Yeah, well, so I went in as a senior physio therapist, and then we had triage roles there, which is so that was kind of like breaking up the week, really, with some treating patients, well, not treating patients, but listening to patients and their subjective histories on the phone and stuff, and helping them work out what to do. And that was one. And then I got promoted to an advanced level physiotherapy role. So that was That was a bit more intense, more time with patients, you know, referring on for investigations and things. Enjoyed that. And then the regional clinical lead at the time, she went on to maternity leave, and so I was asked to apply, so I did. Yeah, I got it. So I was doing that for well, for about a year actually, I think, in the end. And that was managing a lot of physios up in the north. So I'd have to manage, because by this point Nuffield had bought loads of gyms to supplement the hospital network. And so obviously we had physiotherapists within those gyms, and we didn't, you know, someone had to sort of manage them clinically, and you know, so it's really quite varied, sort of challenging role, really, you know, sort of like dealing with people's career development, like complex cases, teaching, dealing with potentially sometimes, not often, but complaints, and doing things like root cause analysis and stuff. So it really took me out of my comfort zone, really. Although my first day on the RCL job, I got an email. Literally, I logged on, and then like about an hour later, I got an email from the physio at Barrow in Furness, who I'd never met, just saying, "Oh, I've just handed in my notice." I was like, "Right, okay, this is yeah." I mean, I don't think it's anything I've done, but this is right. Okay, this is a new step. And obviously, I'd never had anything like that to deal with before in my career, so I was a bit like, "Right, okay, this is going to be a steep learning curve," and it was, but it was good. So
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one with that, and it's not just in the clinical world as well, but when people do well in their jobs, say it's as a physio in this instance, and then you get promoted into a managerial role, what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it should be someone who's clinical and knows the job? Because it's always talked about in the NHS that should people be managers, should managers manage specific managers, or is it better to promote people from within? I mean, there's no definitive right or wrong, but what are your thoughts on that?
I don't. I think it's really tough one. It really is, because you know, there's the rationale that clinicians are clinicians and that's what their focus is and whatever, and that they don't make good managers because they don't think about the strategy, and it's more about the patient and whatever. And but then you can definitely see it from the other side, that like sometimes it's like you've got to understand from a clinical perspective why something works. My own personal perspective is that clinicians can make fantastic managers, because the best managers that I've ever had were all clinicians. And I think that, like, you know, I always wanted to, when I was managing for the clinicians that I was kind of keeping an eye on, was that they knew that I was still a physiotherapist in the time that I wasn't doing that job, because I didn't do it all the time. You know, I did it like part during the week, sort of thing. And I always wanted them to know that, listen, I really enjoy this job. I really enjoy treating patients. So, because then I think that you can feel a little bit more like, oh, all right, okay, you know, this person's on the coalface with me, sort of thing, rather than sort of preaching from up on high, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, by that sort of thing. Yeah, and I'm trying to sort of speak to a couple of staff members at the minute about, listen, this is a great job. It can sometimes get tiring, because with our job, you know, you're giving a lot of yourself every day. You know, emotionally, it can be quite draining when you've got 15 patients and you're trying to work out how you can help all those patients, and trying to work out their plans and their rehab plans and things. So
Yeah,
there's you know, it's definitely a burnout thing, you know, with clinicians, I think.
yeah. And then, so like in terms of other roles, I know that like we've spoken before about ecovery. Like, just you talk to me about how that came to be.
How did it come about? Really well, it was more about it was about 4 years ago. I think it was 4 years ago. Um, I had four patients in one week, and they all had exactly the same presentation. Now, I've been hearing, you know, I've heard obviously thousands of stories over the years about how patients can find, you know, the right clinician to help them with their problem, or the journeys that they'd had to get to different points. And so one week I had 4 patients. There were male and female, just different people, and all playing different sports. Felt a pop, felt a twist in the knee, felt significant pain, lots of swelling, couldn't carry on, and then pain quickly settled. Went to A&E. No, this isn't criticism of A&E, by the way, because it's really, really difficult to assess, if not impossible to assess an acutely swollen knee. But it's an observation, that's what happened, sort of thing. And then after 2 weeks, they all went back to playing their respective sports, and then suffered what later transpired for them to be a more catastrophic second injury. And I just was struck by the fact that, right, these people have all had the exact same story, and what's that about? Why is the system so broken that that's the case? And then, then we just got thinking about it, and I just got thinking about it and why that would be the case, and then I just thought, I had an idea. I thought it could work, because a lot of what we're taught in our job, and certainly as time's gone on and my career's gone on, I've learned is that actually about 90%, I think, about of how to work out what's wrong with someone is in the story that they tell, is in the symptoms, is in what happened, how did you do it, how do those symptoms relate to each other, what time of day do they come on, do you have any other risk factors for any other problems, what's your previous medical history, all this kind of stuff. What stage are you in your injury, or your issue, and all that plays a part, and you can actually work out what's going on a lot of the time if you sorry, my phone's going off here. Sorry. Yeah, you can often work out what's going on. So it was a case of, well, I just had an idea, and so I went to Simon, who's I was really close with. He's a clinician I really admire. He's a shoulder surgeon based in York. And I just went to him and I said, Simon, do you think this could work? If we had a form online where a patient could tell us about their problem, and if we'd done enough research on where they could go, do you think that would work? And we just talked it through, and that's how it kind of started, really.
And so they fill the form in talking about what happened, and then what the symptoms of when they have the pain or whatever. Is that what it is, or is it just when the actual problem occurred?
Yeah, well, it was basically the fact that if you think about it, like we tried to break it down. This is just from our point of view. This is just how we thought about the problem. We thought, well, there's a problem there. How can we try and solve it, or is there a way to solve it? And we were thinking that, right, okay, well, if a patient has got a problem, so say for example, if we just say, right, so say for example, 18-year-old Jack, sort of thing, he dislocated his shoulder 6 months ago, and then was treated, but then he's left with a clicky, unstable, painful shoulder, right? All that Jack knows is that his shoulder's clicky, unstable, and painful, but really, the two problems that we see that a patient has is not knowing what their issue is likely to be, and then not knowing where to go about it. And when we looked at it, we thought that all the other options that are available out there can help you solve one of those problems, and sometimes not even one of those problems, but none try to address both problems, which is to try and work out as early as possible in the minute a patient is reaching out for help, what their issue is likely to be. And because if you take a detailed enough history, you can actually work it out or you can have a good idea. Digitally, it's hard to say, yes, it is this. Like, say, for example, with someone who's dislocated a shoulder 6 months ago, you're not going to be able to say they've got a Bankart tear or something like that, but you're going to say, well, actually, there's a high likelihood that they need to see a soft tissue shoulder surgeon who specialises in instability. And that was another part of the problem, which is where they go about it, and it's trying to help that, because when you've worked in the industry for a long time, you start to see that actually different clinicians have got different skills and different skill sets. So you might look at Nuffield Leeds Hospital and say, all right, there's 8 knee surgeons there, for instance, but actually 3 of them specialise in soft tissue knee injuries, and 4 of them specialise in joint replacements and such like. So, and then you start to see how complex this can be, and if their issue is like, say, for example, a rheumatology problem, or then that becomes even more complex. So the earlier in that process that you can get a really good clinical opinion, you potentially could help them solve both of those problems. And then really we just tried it and we said, well, does it work? So 4 years ago, we just never stopped working on it, me and Simon, and then and it grew from there really, and it's not stopped since really. And we have, we've had so many people come through and such lovely feedback and such great feedback. But because another thing is that once we'd had this feedback from patients coming through, we had to be like, well, okay, that's great, but actually, did we get them in the right place? Because it's nice that they feel initially, yeah, that was great, you've really helped me out, thank you. But then it was a case of, but actually, did you end up in the right place? Did you actually have the treatment we thought? Because it's pointless if you've then had to go on somewhere else. And that was the feedback we were getting, that actually they ended up in the right place. So then we were just like, right, well, I think we're onto something here. And then we just carried on building it, really.
And have you got a particular vision as to where you want it to get to?
Yeah, it sounds a bit naive, really, but yeah, not really. I mean, I think we're just we're obviously past the sort of, we feel we're past the proof of concept stage, and that's definitely there. I think the technology is exciting because where it's at the minute, it's not needed to be, based on how are you going to process hundreds of thousands of users, but the technology that we're building now would be able to do that, and we'll sort of show how that could be achieved by using technology, because by using tech and good clinicians and really rigorous data set, you're like, yeah, okay, that really could work. And so that's the exciting bit at the minute, really. And but it's been a lot of hard work. It's been like a lot of hard work. I mean, you'll know, you own your own business. It's not it's a lot of work, but it's been fun because I really believe that it works, because that's the feedback we're getting. So yeah, the vision really is just to carry on developing it, really, and so we're at the stage where we're developing the technology right now. So yeah, I mean, I can't talk too much about that, but yeah, that's literally where we are at present. So we'll just keep building it, and yeah.
No, it sounds really exciting. The feedback I've heard outside of you has been great as well. So it's commendable to come up with anything. It definitely is challenging doing that. What do you think that you've learned then? What the skills that you've learned from the last 4 years of doing it?
Resilience, I think, is one. Just hard work is absolutely imperative. I think genuinely is just a belief that you feel it's the right thing to be doing. Because me and Simon set off when we were like, right, well, impartiality is absolutely critical to it. So it's pointless if you go on to our website and someone's just paid us to it's the impartiality thing, and we wanted it to be free because we didn't want a paywall. You're not going to solve the problem if you put a paywall there. So we wanted it to be just lovely and simple and free. And so just trying to work around those challenges, and but has required hard work and resilience. But none of that would have happened if I didn't and Simon didn't like really believe in it, and just think that actually that is a viable solution. So yeah, just that determination maybe is the right word.
Mm. And then just in physio in general, then, what do you think are the other non-clinical skills that make someone a good physio clinician?
Yeah, communication definitely is. You can be the best. Yeah, you can be the best. You can be the most studious person in the world, but if you can't communicate to a patient about what's wrong, then you're going to really struggle, I think. Yeah, so I definitely think communication is absolutely imperative, and it's not easy actually, because it's not easy at our job, because there's a lot to learn, and like no one makes it easy, because like even just like the muscles are all in Latin. I mean, do you know what I mean? Like just even that, even that is like it's not easy to remember all these muscles and things like that. So yeah, it takes a lot of determination, but yeah, communication is imperative, I think.
It is difficult. I remember doing my, I think maybe it was my A levels doing PE. I think yeah, it was PE, and trying to learn. No, maybe it was even GCSE actually. Like we did the skeletal system, and that was could get that, and I always had a good memory of whatever it was. But then I was away for when we did like the muscular side, and I just always found it really difficult to get back after that. But it is really complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, I've learned a lot actually, because we set up a sports injuries clinic at the hospital about 4 years ago. Alastair Jones, who you might know, he's the head of medical at Leeds Rhinos. My point is that I spend a lot of time with him on a Friday afternoon in clinic with him. And his surface anatomy and his palpation skills are off the scale. So yeah, like what did he teach me the other week? We had a patient and we thought, well, we were right. He'd ruptured his distal biceps, and but we could feel some gristle, for want of a better word, at his distal in his cubital fossa, and it was like, well, what's that? And I was like, oh, it's distal lacertus, and I was like, I've never even heard of lacertus, and it's just like, so just these things. But then our job, you've got to accept that. You've got to accept that you can't, you've just got to accept that every day is a school day, and that you're just learning constantly. So yeah, that was yeah, it's very, very difficult, but very, very rewarding. And that's the thing about the job. It's rewarding. So it gives back a lot to anyone who puts the work in to get it. But it's very competitive as well. So it's not easy. You have to work hard. So I guess hard work and communication skills are kind of two absolute imperatives, really.
Yeah, and then in terms of for you to like switch off, I know you're doing your work in Nuffield as well as doing ecovery as well. So like, what do you do to switch off? Like, if you, I love professional development books and reading in general, but like, do you do any of that?
Yeah, I do actually. I like podcasts. I was listening, in fact, around the time when about 4 years ago, when we were thinking of ecovery, I was listening to. Have you heard of How I Built This by Guy Raz?
I've not actually. Make a note of it.
It's really good podcast. Really good podcast. He interviews people like James Dyson, and all the other kind of like business figures who've gone on to build different companies and whatever. And so I was listening to a lot of that at that time. So that's good. And I like doing my own investments and stuff like that. So I'm always fascinated by finance and things. So but I do that in more my sort of hobby, really. But yeah, I do that kind of stuff. I mean, obviously, I'm still a massive football fan and playing with the kids and all that kind of stuff. So I've got plenty to fill my time, as I'm sure
Yeah.
you have.
What would you recommend from like just from a if you were going to recommend one or two, whether it's not podcasts, say, but like other bits of things to read, or I don't know if you use Blinkist, but I love Blinkist, which is it summarizes books for you. So I do loads of professional development books, and it does it in like 15 minutes. It's audio or in text. But I'm always looking for sort of books that are quite useful that I can get on Blinkist, and then you power through them in an hour and I make notes on it. But are there any professional development books that you think that have made an impact?
They're probably not the ones that like professional development books, really. I mean, I'm more like I read stuff like the intelligent investor and stuff like that. Stuff like the Essays of Warren Buffett is an amazing book. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's an absolute legendary investor. And a lot of his kind of teachings, he's known as the Sage of Omaha. He was anyway. I think he's like the second richest bloke in the world. But the reason he is because he's just such a wonderful businessman and wonderful sort of like investor, really. So he's got a lot to learn, and he's got a lot to teach, and reading about him is wonderful. But then Glenn Arnold has done a lot of written a lot of books about the great investors and stuff. So I love reading about all that kind of stuff, really. More just kind of fascinated by it more than anything.
Yeah, that's interesting actually, because it's investments is definitely something of interest. Like Warren Buffett is a legend, and he's one of the richest men in the world. Because it's like, what are your thoughts on crypto? Because I know he's not a big fan of it at all, is he?
No, he would say, yeah, he would say that it has no intrinsic value, and because it's got no intrinsic value, it's you're playing the greater fool theory. So you're buying something in the hope that someone else may pay more for it, and they may do. So you may make a profit on that, but you don't know it. Whereas if you buy shares in companies that have got solid fundamentals, then you're much more likely to have a positive outcome, really. So yeah, he doesn't. I think he called it rat poison squared, didn't he? I think so. Yeah, not a big fan at all. Yeah,
Yeah, I might have
but
to pick your brains on investments then at some point, because it's, yeah, I can see that you know what you're talking about in it.
well, I try. Well, I mean, obviously, I can't give him financial advice to anyone, but I can. But I just really enjoy it. I just really find it fascinating. Like, I just find it absolutely utterly fascinating. Because just like you know, massive companies that you might have heard of, and oh, they're doing really well, and then you find out actually when you look at the accounts with like the investment software that I've kind of subscribed to, you like actually have never made a bean in their existence, and you think, oh, well, that surprises me, sort of thing, and just but then you learn a lot about the world by reading about companies, so then like that becomes fascinating, so you just become a bit more worldly wise, I think. So and I think as well as it's just a complete switch off from you know, worrying whether you're doing the best for your patients and all that kind of stuff. So it's just kind of nice, sort of take your mind away to something different. So
Yeah, I know, definitely. I absolutely agree with that. It's interesting. Like I'm watching, there's documentaries. I think it's Channel 4. It's doing Zuckerberg, Bezos, I think Elon Musk, and I can't remember the other person. But yeah, I think it's really interesting when you see these people and the way their mind works, and it's so different to anything else. But it is really, really interesting, and it's like I wouldn't particularly want to be any of them, but it's really fascinating to see how they think or what decisions they've made, or just the way in which they operate. Again, not saying that I would want to do that, or
yeah,
it's just the money always sounds nice, but I know that's only a small part of it, isn't it? Really, they almost say they're not even bothered about the money. A lot of them,
no,
it's more just the love of doing what they're doing.
yeah, I honestly think so. I think so. Honestly, it's just yeah. Peter Lynch is another great person to read. His books are very investment. One up on Wall Street, and then he's got another one.
Who's that?
So Peter Lynch was he was considered one of the greatest fund managers of all time. Like he never like yeah, his funds, I think it was Magellan, I think it was, in Chicago. But yeah, he was just a legendary investor. Well, he is a legendary because he's still alive, but but he retired. Legendary investor, yeah, Peter Lynch. But his books like are really entertaining because it's not. He writes them in a very kind of he's trying to do, like a lot of them do, he's trying to say, listen, what I'm doing is not hard. You just need a bit of understanding, whereas kind of finance can seem very esoteric and not, right, I don't have the capacity to learn about this sort of stuff. Well, actually you do, and that's what they're trying to teach you. They're trying to say anyone can do this. Anyone can take control of their financial future by just investing wisely. And it doesn't take that much if you're interested. Yeah, and that's their message a lot of the time, which is wonderful. We've got a bit off piece there, haven't we?
Yeah, no, I find it really interesting. Yeah, all right. Then, so last question again. It's not a physio one, but what's your favourite football match ever?
Favourite football match? Oh, yeah, that's good fun. Favourite football match?
Not Istanbul, because I would assume that may well be one of them.
Yeah, I mean, well, recently, I mean, the 7-0 recently was pretty special, to be fair, and that came out of the blue, really, didn't it? But I mean, that's right up there. Surely it's got to be. Yeah. There was one game. When I was at college, my mate. I went with. I had a mate. Well, I have mates, Nick and Mark, and I'll never forget it. Mark is this, like, sort of 6 foot, like, sort of bouncer type, like wouldn't sort of, he's hard as nails sort of thing. And he'd never been to Anfield before, and I said, right, I'll get us a ticket. So I got me, Nick, and Mark a ticket, and I drove. We were only about 18 or whatever, and it was the semi-final of the Cup Winners' Cup it was at Anfield against Paris Saint-Germain, and we got there just literally a minute before the game started, and we walked into the Kop. I'm certain it was standing at that time. I'm pretty certain it was. Oh no, it wouldn't be. No, but it was. But everyone was stood up because it was because they're doing "You'll Never Walk Alone." And Mark, kind of like this, hard as nails bloke. I've turned around and he's like, he's having a tear. He's like, "My word, this is awesome!" And I was just like, so that was pretty special, to be fair, because like I'd been about 3 or 4 years up to that point, but I've been going about 3 or 4 years on and off. But yeah, that was pretty special, seeing one of your mates like welling up, and you were like, yeah, that's cool, And we lost that game in the end, but we won. I think we won the game, but we went out. But yeah, that was pretty special, to be fair.
Yeah, I've got to say, Anfield, particularly, I went to watch. I was in the Bromby end. I somehow got tickets in the Bromby end with my dad against Liverpool, which he did lose that game, which is maybe why I remember it. But it was, yeah, the Anfield is a special stadium, isn't it?
Yeah, I was there at that game. Is that we were playing in yellow? Well, they were playing in yellow, weren't they?
Yeah, I think it was Dan Egan scored the winner or something. I remember because it was "Egg in your face" was the brilliant caption in the paper. But it is, yeah, and Anfield is an unbelievable, like, atmosphere. Is good. I've been to quite a few derbies there in my time, of which I went to the recent one where Pickford like threw it in and Origi just popped up. That was a bad one. That.
Yeah, that was It was good to watch from my end, but yeah, I can imagine it was a tough one to take, that one. So yeah.
In the Liverpool fans then with my mate, it was just like, oh, this is not enjoyable. But yeah, it's
well, I had I was invited to go to Sheffield Wednesday in the 90s, somehow in the 90s, about 97 or something, and I was sat in the Kop at Sheffield Wednesday, and I was told by my mate Tom, he was like, under no circumstances celebrate these goals if you score, and I was like, all right, we'll do. And then Michael had scored, and I was just jumping for joy, sort of thing, and I was like, oh, right, okay. And I said, right, I won't do that again. And then he did it again, and then I did it again, and then I said, all right, Tom, I won't do it again. And then he scored again, and then I did it again. I was like, oh, that. And he was like, mate, you're literally going to get us beaten up here. I was like, all right, sorry. So yeah, that wasn't my favourite football game.
yeah. I think they knew the Liverpool fan then after 5 goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Look, Anthony, really appreciate your time on that. We have gone off on some interesting tangents, but yeah, I'm very interested in investing and football, even if it is Liverpool. So, no, thank you for your time and thanks for sharing your story. And best of luck with the recovery. It sounds really exciting.
Yeah, thank you, and same to you.
No problem. Cheers, Anthony. Thanks.
See you, Andy. Bye.